Thank you for plugging into this Family Life News podcast, streaming issues-driven, family-focused news.
This is Faith Under Fire. Each Thursday on Family Life, we give voice to religious battlegrounds in this nation. I'm your host, Tracy Lynn. With us today, Denise Harle, Senior Counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom. Last week, the Equality Act was reintroduced in Congress, and Joe Biden promised during his campaign for president that he would sign such a measure into law within the first 100 days if passed. Despite the name of the Equality Act, would you unpack what it really is, Denise?
Yes, everyone should be treated with dignity and respect, and our laws should protect every citizen's constitutionally guaranteed freedoms. But unfortunately, coercive laws like the so-called Equality Act are sexual orientation and gender identity laws that actually undermine fairness and freedom. And so what it does is actually put the government's power behind a particular ideology about sexual orientation and gender identity. And as a result, it violates the privacy and fairness for girls and women. It strips us of equal opportunities and safety, and it forces certain ideology on people of faith.
Can we talk about what this would mean, particularly for churches and faith-based nonprofits?
Yes, this is extremely dangerous because it essentially makes unlawful biblical beliefs about marriage, sex, and gender. And so from the text of the Equality Act, it looks like faith-based nonprofits would be punished under the law for expressing a belief that marriage is between one man and one woman, or for even having sex-specific programs. I can give you an example. There was a law like this in the city of Anchorage, and the city used the law to go after a faith-based shelter for battered women and force them to allow men who identified as women to sleep and change clothes alongside these homeless women, many of whom were victims of rape and sex trafficking. And it was done all under the guise of, quote, non-discrimination based on gender identity. And that's the same language that's in the Equality Act that would ban churches and faith-based groups from even recognizing a biological difference between male and female.
In New York State, we've seen the government battle against religious foster care and adoption agencies in the past. How would the Equality Act impact those care groups and even business owners?
You know, this is one of the consequences I think people don't realize, which is that this is a serious threat to adoption agencies and foster care groups across the nation, because any of those that place children in loving homes between one man married to one woman would be in violation of the Equality Act and would be potentially shut down by the government for acting according to their beliefs. And the consequence here is it would be robbing orphans and children around the nation of the opportunity to be placed in loving homes. The same is true for faith-based businesses. So this is a lot like the case of Masterpiece Cake Shop, where Jack Phillips, the cake artist, serves everyone but doesn't express all messages. And we took Jack's case all the way to the Supreme Court when Colorado was trying to force him to create custom artwork celebrating same-sex marriage, which violated his sincere religious beliefs. And the Equality Act would do just that, forcing creative professionals and other small businesses around the nation to express messages they don't believe in and punishing them when they do express biblical beliefs.
We're all for people having fair treatment as far as employment and housing and things like that, but my concern is certainly over religious freedom. Also, we're not so far removed from the Me Too movement with outcries over vulnerability and sexual abuse. Yet, if the sponsoring lawmakers get their way, what would the Equality Act mean for privacy issues in schools and sports like Title IX?
Well, the Equality Act would take away the safety and privacy protections for girls in private spaces like bathrooms and changing facilities. It actually says it right there in the text of the law that any biological male who identifies as a female or professes to identify as a female would have to be allowed into those private spaces with girls, teenage girls, young girls, and women. And it's terrifying to think of the consequences when, as you said, we know how dangerous that can be. We should be protecting girls and women. And the same is true for the athletic opportunities. Girls and women have had Title IX protections for decades now, and it's been awesome for just creating a level playing field and allowing girls to have opportunities in education and athletics. But the Equality Act would reverse all of that progress and would say that biological boys can come in, compete against girls, take spots on the podium, take away their medals, take away their scholarships, and leave girls sitting on the sidelines in their own sport.
Denise, we don't want to sit idle. What can we as listeners do to be proactive against an assault on privacy and religious freedom?
Well, I think one thing is just to educate yourself about what this law does. Rather than just looking at the title, read up on it and have conversations with your neighbors. If you're a person of faith, if you're a person who believes that God creates us male and female and that God created marriage between one man and one woman, understand what a threat this is to our beliefs and be willing to share that in conversations. Another thing is your listeners can go to our website, adflegal.org, and follow along. You have Alliance alerts. You can read the news recaps and the highlights. We as citizens have a responsibility to be engaged in the process and make sure that our freedoms are protected. And better to do it on the front end than have to end up in court. But, we will take it all the way to the Supreme Court if we need to.
That's Denise Harle with Alliance Defending Freedom. I'm Tracy Lynn, Family Life News.